Hey metal scholars, with the passing of Paul Dianno, we've lost a voice that set the foundation for what would become the legacy of heavy metal. But Dianno's contribution wasn't just his raw vocals or his stage presence, it was also in the way that the first two Maiden albums, we have Iron Maiden from 1980 and Killers from 1981, laid down the groundwork for the genre's imagery and symbolism. These albums were more than just a sonic experience. They were a blueprint for heavy metal's visual codes, and we do have this massive subculture, and that grows every day and it influences the community until today. So let's dig into how the early Maiden albums, powered by Dianno's grit and energy, helped shape metal's identity. Well, the self-titled debut, Iron Maiden, wasn't just another album. It was a declaration of rebellion, right? A challenge to the mainstream back then. With songs like Phantom of the Opera, the band already began to weave mythological and literary references into the music, and the symbolism in the track introduces the concept of dual identity, something that metal would go on to explore extensively later. And from the Phantom's masked existence to the shadow that many metalheads later connected with, the debut album provided a theatrical layer to heavy music. A song like Running Free, for example, though very simple at first glance with 3 chords, represents the outlaw figure, a symbol that Dianno embodied perfectly. His rebellious persona was mirrored in this track, connecting Iron Maiden with the disenfranchised, with the rebellious youth. So it is all about the rebellious spirit, which is a key theme in heavy metal, lyrical and visual language, and that can be traced directly back to Dianno's attitude on these early records. One of the most symbolic moments comes from Iron Maiden, the actual song. It's not just an anthem, it's the introduction of Eddie, a character that would become the most iconic symbol in metal history. Eddie's rise in the visual culture of metal started right here, with that zombie-like character representing both death and immortality. And ironically, Eddie's undead imagery parallels Dianno's legacy, as his contribution lives on right now, immortalized in metal history with those 2 iconic albums. Now we veer into the dark streets of Killers from 1981, and by the time the album dropped, the symbolism in Maiden's work was becoming even more pronounced. The artwork featuring Eddie wielding an axe with a blood-stained hand tapped into the darker, more violent aspects of human nature. And Dianno's voice here, very raw, very unpolished, was the perfect vehicle for this darker imagery, contrasting with the more polished and more operatic styles that would later dominate metal's vocals with like Dio and Bruce Dickinson. Wrathchild is a standout in both its musical aggression and the symbolic portrayal of generational anger. This song laid the groundwork for metal's love affair with the idea of the outcast. It's the voice of someone searching for revenge, disconnected from society, and seeking identity through destruction. And that was further amplified by Dianno's creative performance, Child of Wrath. That archetype can be seen in countless metal subgenres today, and that developed later on from like thrash metal to even black metal. Meanwhile, Murders in the Rue Morgue brought the literary influence of Edgar Allan Poe into metal's symbolic realm. And we have a narrative of mistaken identity, of chaos in the streets, and that's an early example of how metal would use these references to discuss larger, more existential themes such as alienation, fate, and morality. We have Killers, the title track, and that's pure psychological horror, a first-person account from the mind of a killer, and Dianno's delivery here is visceral, bridging the gap between narrative and emotion. The song foreshadowed the introspective yet brutal nature of many metal bands who would explore the dark corners of the mind later on as a legacy and following Iron Maiden's footsteps. Paul Dianno brought an essential roughness, a streetwise authenticity to Iron Maiden's early work. His vocals weren't operatic or super technical. They were raw, unpolished. They were real. They embodied that rebellious spirit that would become central to heavy metal's identity. It was Dianno's voice that carried the dark, the violent symbolism of these early albums. He helped anchor Iron Maiden in a gritty, almost punk ethos that gave metal this edge, and it set the stage for more complex narratives and more themes that later on were explored by the band and all the genres. As we bid farewell to a legend, let's also celebrate the legacy of Paul Dianno, who helped lay the foundation for metal symbolism that we know today. The spirit and the contribution to the visual and the thematic storytelling is something that metalheads worldwide will continue to hold in high regard. His voice may have left us, but his spirit continues to rage on, forever embedded in the fabric of heavy metal. And that does it for me, Metal Scholars. Please share your comments down in the comment section below. And as always, music is what music does. And I'm signing out. Bye now.